Hey, Well-Rounders, Jamira here, and I just wanted to let you know before we jump into today's episode that it is longer than normal, and that is because these topics that we are going to be discussing are hard. They're hard topics, they're much needed topics, and with everything going on in the world, we just could not stop the conversation. And so I hope you stick around with us till the end. Know that this is a conversation that is important. So pause it if you have to pause it, but we are going to dive into some things that are super important. And I just hope that you do learn from this. Hey there, and welcome to A Well-Rounded Life, the podcast, a space for creative entrepreneurs seeking an intentional life and biz filled with grace, passion, and purpose. I'm your host, Jamira. I'm a mama, wife, dessert fanatic, and on the ultimate mission to get you closer to your idea of what it means to live a well-rounded life. Right here is where you'll find curated resources, quick tips, and relatable stories, no matter what season of life you're in. So hang out with me for a bit and let's dive in. Not sure when you're listening to this episode. However, today is Thursday, June 4th, 2020. If you've been following the news and the current events, you know that there is a lot going on in the world, tough conversations, raw feelings, hurt, and much needed change in the world. Today, I spoke on a panel regarding the issues of diversity in the wedding industry, which goes to show you that there is a lot of change in things that need to happen in all of our workspace. And I don't know if you can hear the thunder, but honestly, it kind of resembles a lot of people's feelings right now. So you'll be hearing that in the background because it's literally thunderstorming here. But again, these conversations are long overdue. They are hard, so hard, but they are needed. And I thought that we would continue the conversation over here because I feel that there is just so much that we should all be learning in this season. All of us, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, purple, green, whatever color you are, this is the perfect season to be learning. And I am just so blessed to have in my life for the past 2+ decades, my BFF, Lynette Barksdale. She is joining us today. Lynette's life mission and her goal is to bring awareness to the importance of diversity and inclusion. And so she's always been my go-to person for great and tough conversations and education and knowledge. I just learned so much from her through our daily conversations about race relations. And so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and read the bio from my guest, Lynette Barksdale. Lynette is literally one of my very best friends. Like, we all have friends, but this is my sister. So Lynette was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, our hometown. She graduated from North Carolina State University with a degree in business management while running a nonprofit focused on closing the achievement gap for elementary students in Raleigh, North Carolina. Currently, Lynette is a VP of Diversity and Inclusion at a prominent financial services company located in Dallas, Texas. Lynette has worked across multiple industries, including retail, nonprofit, and technology. Prior to her current role, Lynette worked at Google, serving as the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion for Google Cloud for over 5 years, based in Austin, Texas. Lynette's greatest passion is ensuring access and opportunity for children who come from underserved communities. She began this work while in college running a nonprofit program that provided after-school tutoring for students who were at risk of failing their grade level. Since the completion of this program, Lynette has focused on philanthropy in this area and in the area of racial equality. Lynette continues to serve on boards in an advisory capacity and lends her expertise to organizations across the country actively striving towards equality. I don't know anyone else that would be better fit for this conversation, and so I wanted to bring you the best of the best. So let's get into today's show. Lynette.
Hi, Jamira. I'm so excited to be here with you. I do want to tell your listeners, you are literally the only person that could get me to do something like this during this week, which has been extremely exhausting, I think, for a lot of people,
Right.
including myself. So I just want you to know that this is
me.
just for you.
Yeah, y'all, seriously, because this is, again, what she's great at, talking about diversity and inclusion. you can imagine that people have been going to her, using her as a resource, and she's just been just so gracious with our hour. I think we've probably spoken every night for like an hour about diversity in the movement and all the things that we can do to just bring awareness. And so I know she's tired because I'm tired and I haven't even done half of the work she's done. But Lynette, introduce yourself to our well-rounders before we get into it.
Yeah, so Jamira touched on it a little bit. My name is Lynette Barksdale. I am from the Alexandria, Virginia area, DMV as we call it. I now live in Dallas, Texas. I believe this is probably my fifth stop in 10 years of cities that I've lived in, and Jamira's come to visit every single one of those almost. Maybe every single one, maybe not Houston.
Oh, I was in Houston.
Oh, okay. So every single one.
How about that?
And it's, so my work is rooted in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll add equity because I think it's really important, and we can dig into that in a little bit. Through this last week, I would say, has been probably the most draining in my career, right? I think, from doing this work in the tech industry, the nonprofit space, in retail, for consulting for companies, we have had tragedies and murders happen in the past. And I think this is the first time where I can say sometimes I'm at a loss for words, and I do this as a profession. It's really exciting to be here, really excited to talk about this. We could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'm happy that you're doing this.
Yeah, we do. It's not just about reality TV, Netflix, and cocktails, because we like to mix up our cocktails. We legit have these tough conversations that are so needed. So Lynette, one of the questions I have for you is, with all that's going on in the world regarding the Black community, for those that may be living under a rock or need clarification, can you just summarize what is going on and maybe your thoughts on how we even got to this point?
Yeah, I don't know if I can summarize, Jamira. I haven't been on this earth this long, but I can tell you what I know, right? For about 401 years since some of our ancestors were bought to this country, stolen from our home, and brought to this country. This country has been built on oppression and using people and their resources and their talents for others to get ahead. And if we even go back to slavery and we think about how this country, the fields, the farms that we visit, the plantations that still exist, right? Those things were all built by Black people. And this land was taken even from the indigenous community that was here before even slaves arrived on this land, right? And so I think there is just so much so much history of oppression that this country is rooted on. And when you think about the contracts, and when I talk about contracts, I'm talking about the Constitution, and I'm talking about the Declaration of Independence. When those were built, they weren't built for Black people. Though those were not written with Black people in mind as equal humans. And so I think if we take that history and we kind of fast forward through, and I hate to even say fast forward because I think it demeans what our ancestors have done and have lived through in their experiences. But if we move closer towards the 60s and the civil rights era, where we had people, which I think is very similar to what's happening right now, protesting and riots that were happening around trying to obtain rights that Black people did not have. And this is even while people were fighting in wars. People were serving in the military. Black people were serving in the military to come home and be refused the same benefits that white soldiers were. When you talk about all the loans that were given for housing, for people to get back on their feet, Black people did not have that. And so this system of oppression has continued on and on. And then we had what I would call the straw that broke the camel's back, right? We have had lynchings, as I will call it, since Emmett Till that we have been able to witness, and it's written down in history, to George Floyd laying on the ground, restrained, and someone consciously taking his life away for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And I think this is one of the first times that people have seen this type of murder happen. And there is no way for any human to justify what happened, right? Because you'll hear people say, but this, but that person was doing this, but that person was doing that. There's no but. This man was laying on the ground. Right.
Yeah. I was talking to someone today about it. For whatever petty crime, he didn't murder anybody. He didn't rob any, like, he wasn't doing anything, holding up a gun to kill. Legit, it was a situation where no one should have lost their life that day for any of the act, for what he was allegedly doing.
And there's so many other examples that we can go back to, people who were just sitting in a car who shouldn't have gotten killed because they were pulled over by a cop. I mean, this is an issue that there is really no rationale for many, if not all, of the killings that have happened with people who have been unarmed, whether they were running away from the police or running in their neighborhood and having civilians who want to serve as law enforcement, killing a man jogging in his own neighborhood, right? There's no justification for this. But I think this was a moment where people saw him laying there, saw now with the other videos that came out, people telling the cops, you're killing him. And he still did not move his leg. All he had to do was move his leg.
And then history,
and he chose not to.
The thing is, when you think about it, if that man just would have moved his leg, history would not be what it is. It's like that one movement would not maybe have had us speak up the way we needed to speak up to begin with, or even have started these conversations. So it's just interesting to me how things work out based off of one single movement or gesture. I'm sure when he woke up that morning, the cop, the same way, George Floyd never thought he would die that day, I'm sure the cop never thought that his life and legacy will forever be changed, along with his coworkers, for something so stupid.
I mean, and the reality is his legacy was already tainted, right? I mean, if there are records, there are records of force that are on file, right? From before. There was this one video that was posted where his daughter is sitting on the shoulders of one of his close friends, or this guy who refers to him as his twin, and she says, "Daddy changed the world," and he literally has changed the world that we are living in. And I really wish that it did not take that. I wish that it did not take, the murders of Black people who were young and in their prime for us to get to this point. And let's not forget, there are people who have committed their lives to doing this work for a very long time. There are organizations like Campaign Zero. There are many places who have committed their lives to doing this work. And because this is not new, right? And so I really do hope that as we continue to have this conversation, because my hope is that it doesn't stop when the media cycle shifts, right? But my hope is that we will continue to recognize that there are many lives that have been lost to get us to this point, and that we don't want to lose any more. Right. And I think that is where, I think Black people, and me as a Black woman who looks at my brother, who looks at my cousins, who looks at the men that I consider my family, and I'm like, this could be them any day.
Right.
Any
Absolutely.
day.
Right. Something that I've noticed this week on social media is that some people are confused with why we use the terms, we say Black community versus people of color, because I know a lot of people have been checked on people of color, people of color. Can you clarify the difference for some people who still may be a little bit confused?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all challenging, right? We don't have a shared language in this space, which I
Right.
think makes it very challenging for people to truly understand what language is right and wrong, or what should I say, what shouldn't I say. So
Mhm.
I think in this case, what we're referring to and what we're talking about is that, you know, people of color is a very wide spread of different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds that cover, whether it be from our Asian community, Asian Pacific Islander community, to our Hispanic, Latinx brothers and sisters. Like, I mean, there is a wide gambit when you say people of color. And I
Mhm.
think while there are certain atrocities that each community faces in their own right? Like, I think about, there's a lot of intersections we have, but there are a lot of differences, right? I think about our Asian community and how they were targeted during this COVID pandemic just because of who they were and because of some of the rhetoric that was coming out around where it stemmed from. I think about our Black community, our Hispanic Latinx community, who were hardest hit when it comes to the deaths that were coming from COVID, right? I think we have kind of grouped everyone together because it makes it easier,
Mm.
and it makes it so that we don't actually have to tell the hard truths about what is happening, right? And
Right.
so when you isolate and say Black people, right, you are actually saying that, and now you're pulling out the statistic that, okay, we know that there is an issue with police brutality around communities of color, but we know Black people are about 2.5 times as likely to die at the hands of officers, right?
Okay.
That's a statistic that you don't have to use if you group it in people of color,
Got
right?
Got it. That makes sense. Is that in this instance, and for what this particular struggle is, we are specifically speaking of people in the Black community. And so that's what the focus is on when we think about Black Lives Matter and that movement. Which brings me to another question that I had, is that people have been getting backlash for using the hashtag and the term All Lives Matter or ALM or whatever, as opposed to Black Lives Matter. And something that I wanted you to better explain to us is, why is using the term All Lives Matter more offensive, or offensive overall, to people that are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement?
I'm going to put two hats on here, Jamara. I'm going to
Oh,
first put on,
here we
yeah,
go.
Jamara said, oh
Here we
Lord.
go. I already know her, so here we go.
This is uncut for the people. My first hat is going to be my Black woman hat, because that's the one I live with every single day. And I'm going to say, I'm sick of explaining this to people, right? Like you saw the video, you know why Black Lives Matter. You saw how when people were out protesting peacefully and riots ensued through antagonists who were paid to come out in those protests and do just that, how most people who were taken away and targeted were Black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
With my Black woman hat, I don't even want to have that conversation anymore. Now I'm going to put back on my D&I hat that I have to wear when I go to work every single day.
D&I is diversity and inclusion.
Diversity and inclusion.
I'm learning.
And that is that there again, we goes back to what I said. We don't want to face the hard truth. When we say all lives matter, we get to mesh the statistic that, well, if we really think about how many people die a year from X, Y, and Z, or who die from health-related issues, or police brutality is a very low number compared to X, Y, and Z, right? Like, we get to use the numbers that make us feel better to create a narrative instead of facing the hard truth. Right. And when you say all lives matter, but when clearly certain intersections of that do not matter, you are still then excluding Black people. So if we're not part of All Lives Matter, because clearly we're not, then where do we belong? So this is why you need to break it up, and you need to focus on the things and the people that are being targeted and hunted, right? Which are Black lives in this moment. That is what we are talking about, because we are tired of this, and we have been facing this for 401 years, and we are tired. And so we need to put our focus right now on Black lives and the systems that are taking our Black people away from their families and this earth. That is what we need to focus on.
And when you use the word hunted, like I felt that in my chest. Like, people, you literally have to understand that people, Black people, are being hunted. Like you said, imagine a deer or someone running through the forest and someone's hunting them. You just think about, the incidents a few weeks prior to George Floyd, where he literally was hunted down for running. And that is the comparison. That's how some Black people are treated, like animals, like they are. When you also said earlier, we were less than, as far as, we weren't even considered a full person, full percentage. And that's something that people literally need to sit with. It's uncomfortable, but think about your Black coworker, colleague, your child in your kid's classroom. They weren't even considered a full person. We take up a full seat. They take our full tax dollars. But the reality is we weren't, and to some people's eyes, we still aren't considered equals or worthy, because we aren't, because of the color of the skin that we did not choose to be born into. And that's a conversation I have with my daughter when you're trying to explain to a 10-year-old why things are happening in the world. That is the hardest thing, to try to explain something that don't make sense. It is just hard to explain to someone that someone is getting killed, murdered, hunted, lynched, assassinated, whatever, because of the color of their skin, and because people don't see them as a full, worthy human. And that has been the toughest conversation that I've had to have, because there's still confusion. And I don't know if because I don't even get it. So how do you explain it to your child?
Jamar, I'm going to try to be stoic as I talk about this. I don't know. You haven't seen your emails yet. So everyone, Peyton is part of this kid group that I host every week. And, there's about 6 kids that come together, and we talk about a bunch of different things. And luckily last week I was quote unquote trying to take a vacation, and we didn't have our group circle, as I call it. And so I was able to skip over this conversation last week. But this week, I knew, one, I couldn't skip the class again, even though in my heart, I really wanted to.
They was not letting you skip the class.
But they were not letting me take 2 weeks off. And, I knew we were going to have this conversation. And it was the hardest thing I think I have ever had to do.
Oh, gosh.
Ever.
I'm glad it was you.
You have kids who are so young and are just trying to figure out why their lives don't matter. Yeah, so Jamar, this was the hardest thing I think I ever had to do, was to explain to kids and answer their questions, right? Because to be honest, the best part about this actually was that the kids were so aware. Like, they actually were very clear about what was happening right now and why. They didn't know all of the names. They couldn't tell you all of them, but they could use words like police brutality. They knew a man was killed. They knew that, it was because that this man was Black that this experience happened to him. And it was heartbreaking, though, because I think about, at that age, I think we were still young when the Rodney King riots happened. And I still don't think I was aware. The oldest kid in that group is 11. So I don't even think at 11, I was as conscious as these kids are. And the youngest kid in the group was 6, right? So we're talking about protesting. We're talking about race. We're talking about racism. And I think what I wanted to do is I wanted to let them talk. I wanted to see what they knew, because you also don't want to take away the innocence that they have at this point.
Right.
And that's what I feel like the world is doing to them, whether it be through the mass consumption of social media that they have access to, or, you know, just what's happening in the world, even COVID, right? Like we have had to explain so many things to kids that I just don't think in my generation we had to.
No.
That it, you know, I have to do this all day for adults. And I was talking to one of my coworkers right after, and I'll get to like what we talked about, but I said, you know, if I could explain it to them and they could walk away like, okay, I get it, I can explain it to anyone, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
And the hardest question I got was, why are they doing this to us? Right? Like what did we do to deserve this?
Right. Yeah.
And what did you and then you have to go into the history, right? Because the reality is you did nothing to deserve this, right? You did. And I think that is the true trauma in it all, is that there is no degree, no car you can drive, no job you can have, no amount of money that keeps you safe from what is happening and from the systemic racism that exists in this country. There's nothing that can save you. And I think that is what was the hardest thing for me, is because you want to say, well, you know, that's why we have the systems in place to help, but those systems need to be completely dismantled, and an entirely new system needs to be built that is actually safe for them to grow up in.
Right.
And you know, so I kept telling them, you know, well, you have all of these adults who are fighting for you. That's what the protests are about. People are using their voices so that you all can grow up in a different society than what we currently have. And I remember one little girl said, I'm just really worried. And I said, well, what are you worried about? And she said, I'm worried about my parents. Like, they're just, I know they're really scared for me, and I don't know what to tell them.
Wow.
I mean, talk about emotional intelligence and empathy and awareness, all of the things that you want adults to have. It was bottled up in these kids, and it was heartbreaking, but I do believe that it was necessary. And I think for them to have their own little community to talk about it within was really helpful, because some people were dropping gems about slavery and segregation. And again, y'all, this is 6 through 11, right? And it was just, it was incredible to hear their voices, but sad that we had to have that conversation.
Wow. I think to piggyback off that is the fact of, when I'm explaining things to, you know, my 10-year-old, and she asks me a question and I don't know the answer, I can say, hello, and I want to say, oh, I can say it, it's off. Hello, Google, or hi, Google, because you know it's going to start answering questions. But I can ask Google a question if I don't know the answer from if my daughter asks me a question I don't know the answer to. In this case, I can't ask Google. And if I can ask Google, it's not going to make sense. This is probably the only question. If I ask Google, she's going to be like, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer. I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah. And so this is probably the one question I cannot ask Google that my child has asked me. And that's, you know, interesting to me when I think about all of it. But just want to applaud you for the work you're doing in the Kiddos Circle each week, taking time out of your work day to educate them on an assortment of topics. Because it's not just diversity stuff. They're learning about stocks, traveling, the world, and projects, and history and heroes. So every week it's a new theme. So Lynette gives us parents a break, and she takes them on virtually for once a week. And my daughter comes out of her room excited to tell me what they learned about. And I know that she's learning something that is going to enrich her life. So just want to say thank you on the record for that.
The best part of my week.
That's awesome. Another question I have is, for those that say that they don't know what to say, Lynette, what advice would you give on what is acceptable and what is absolutely not acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the position you sit in, right? I mean, I think the reality is at this juncture, if you are leading other people, it is unacceptable to not say anything.
Hmm.
To your point, we can research questions and get resources and educate ourselves in a way that is more advanced than we ever have in society, right? And so it's unacceptable to say nothing. I think the middle point to that is you should not say, especially if you identify as white, that you understand, because you actually don't understand, and you'll never understand what it feels like to walk outside every day outside of your four walls. You can actually even be in your four walls in Breonna Taylor's case and still lose your life. So you don't understand. And so I think taking that out of the vocabulary, I think will actually help people be able to come to the table and have some sort of conversation. This is now, since I think things started really escalating, about a week. And just on calls today, people still have so much emotion
Mm-hmm.
in them, and anger and frustration, that they still can't speak without crying. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think that, to have people sitting in silence, and especially if you're a manager at a company or you run a business and you have a team, and not saying anything, it's almost like you're saying, I don't care. Even if you do care, it's almost saying like you don't care, because your silence is just as bad as saying the wrong thing. Because when you say the wrong thing, you can actually come back and say, I apologize. This is actually what I meant. I did some research on my own. I did some studying. This is what I meant. But when you say nothing and you let time pass, it is crippling,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Well, funny, but not funny. When you said that, I just got this vision of someone pouring their heart out to someone in front of them, crying, telling them about something horrible that's happened or how they're feeling, and someone just looking at them like, can you just hurry up so I can move on with
Yeah.
my day? That's what
Yeah.
silence, feels like when you are literally pouring your heart out on social media through Instagram lives or Facebooks or your post or your phone calls and texts. You're pouring your heart out saying, we are hurting. This hurts. I don't understand. We need to fix something. And your people, your peers, your colleagues, even some people's family members are looking at them blank,
Yeah.
like, oh, well, can you imagine what that would feel like if you're pouring your heart out to someone, telling them how much you're hurt and you don't feel any type of compassion, empathy, nothing.
I mean, and let's layer that on, Jamira, that, oh, surprise, we're still in the middle of a pandemic,
Oh, facts.
right? Where like 21,000 new cases just in 24 hours, right? Like we people were already isolated. People were already alone in some instances, and then you layer on this trauma, right?
Mhm.
Like, honestly, if you're a therapist, man, this is your time. Like, I
Money.
mean, this is amazing. I mean, this is your time. Like,
Right.
there are so many people in need of these services, and I think, if you were able to say, okay, I'm coping with COVID, I'm okay. I can, I'm handling it, I'm managing it. I might be by myself, but I'm okay. And then you layer this trauma on. I mean, I can't even imagine people who don't have someone to talk to during this time. And actually, I don't even have to imagine it, because I have so many coworkers who are more junior in remote offices who couldn't go home to family because of
Mhm.
COVID, and have just been by themselves,
Right.
sitting in this.
Yeah.
Black people sitting in this alone. It's hard. It's terrible. And so I think, to your point, people need to open up the conversation. And I tell people, I try not to start off conversations with, oh, how are you doing? Because that, to a Black person right now, is, I have a couple answers for you, right? Like, I'm exhausted, I'm angry, I can't cope, I barely got out of bed today. In some of the sessions I'm hosting, I start off with, would you like to tell me how you're feeling right now? Or tell me one word that describes your current mood right now, right? Because how are you doing seems just so ignorant to
It's
what is
automated.
happening around us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's an automatic, hey, how you doing? And the expectation is people say, I'm good, how are you? Reality is that's not gonna cut it right now. Because we've all
Yeah, I'm
had
gonna take my
emotions.
DNI. Yeah, I'm gonna take my DNI hat off again and say, it was interesting this week. I played a new game, right? Like when people would call me and more senior people because I wanted to really start to train people to try a new approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was, hey Lynette, how are you doing? And Jamar, you know me, like chipper usually, like when I'm at work, I was like, I'm terrible.
It's not
I was
funny.
like, I have had a terrible morning.
Right.
Like I am angry. I mean, and I did this all day. And it's interesting because, these people jump on the phone. They're so happy. They're like, what's going on? How was your weekend? Was it great? And I'm like, no.
No.
Did you turn on the TV? Did you scroll through any social media posts this weekend?
Right.
And so I was using myself as an example and to model how I actually needed leaders to show up, right? Which was not this like top of the morning, like what's going on, but
Hey, how's it going?
hey, like, what are you feeling today? Like, and I think, and it's interesting. So as I kept doing it throughout the day, the Tuesday messages were so much better. They were, Lynette, just checking in on you, wanted to make sure you didn't need anything from me today. Or Lynette, is there something I can take off your plate to support you today? Or Lynette, I hope you're doing better than you were yesterday, right? Like, so completely shifted how they approached it. And my hope was that what I could model is how you can show up for people and show empathy, even if you didn't know that you needed to in the beginning.
Yeah, they probably had a conversation about you at 5 o'clock.
You know what? That's great.
Say,
Like, that's great.
Right.
If that's how I need to fall on the sword, that's how I'll fall on the sword.
Yeah, you took one for the team.
It is what it is.
Leading
I might
by
be living
example.
in your spare bedroom, in a couple of weeks, but it is what it is.
Leading by example. There's always space for you here. We will knock on wood on that. Something else that has come up is that I've been seeing some people in the comments, white people and colleagues and friends, looking like they're trying to do better. Some people just don't feel like they're with it. Some people's comments are, too late, you should have done this, or where were you when, da 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 da. Do you personally feel like it is too little too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. I think people forget that there are stages to grief. And I think what people are forgetting is that people are grieving. And it might not seem like, it was a personal loss to some people, but for many people, I'm not going to speak to everyone in the Black community, it almost felt like this was a family member to me.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Right. And again, it was because of the true reality that you get faced with when you see a situation like this, right? Like, you can have all these allies around screaming, you're killing me, you're killing him, and nothing happened, right? So people are going through all the stages of grief right now. And right now people are angry. And you can't want people to have a different emotion right now because rightfully so, people are angry. The pandemic and these most recent tragedies have created such a great divide in access to resources and opportunities and healthcare. And I think we are seeing all of these things are stacking up on one another. People are angry. So it's not, I do believe it can change. I do believe that people can change. People can have an awakening. People can get on a journey. But I think what people are frustrated with is that there's no action behind the message, right? So you just saying, I recognize that Black people are hurting. Oh, okay. Like that, thank you. But that does not do anything for me tomorrow. So I recognize that Black people are hurting and we are working towards becoming an organization that strives for equity through removing some of our racist behaviors and systems that promote racism, that's an action, right? And I think you will see a lot of that feedback on some of the comments on some of the messages that are coming out. And again, people are just angry. And I think people have to understand that sentiment and respect it and have empathy towards it, and know that there will be the second stage where people start to really want to then come up with greater steps to drive towards action. But you already have people who are making steps towards action. You already have organizations that are stepping up. There's incredible people who are taking action. If you want to see an action-oriented statement, look at Ben & Jerry's statement.
Ben & Jerry's been about their life.
I
did a case study on them in grad school, and just their position. They don't give to you fill in the blanks. They just want to do what feels right. And it's a part of their core values. And that's something that I want people to think about. Your core values in your personal life, your core values in the work environment that you choose to be a part of. Do your personal values align with the core values of the people that pay you every day? The place you show up and spend your time, the place that takes your time away from your family. Do their core values align with yours? Take a serious look at your employer and the people you surround yourself with, and decide, do their core values and what they stand for and how they have reacted to major life-changing events, do they align with yours? That's something that we all need to start taking inventory of, because how they feel and how they respond will definitely affect how you continue to do business and walk in your everyday life. Okay, so Lynette says that it's not too little, it's not too late, and I feel the exact same way, that you have to extend grace to people that are at least trying, and only time will tell based off of their actions. That has been my sentiment. Give people room to prove themselves. I think that is super important. And then people, we talked about action steps. So do you have 3 action steps, however many, that you feel we can include in our home or workplace to move in the right direction?
Well, I mean, voting, number one. I'm just going to say that, because voting
that's
is
very important.
Very
Vote,
important.
guys.
There are different things that different people can do, but I think a couple of things, right? Because we've talked about the workplace, we've talked about parents, we've talked about our society as a whole, right? And I think people need to realize that there are people who have been doing this work for a very long time and have been reaching kind of this ceiling that they can't push any further, because people truly did not want to see change. And so when you think about trying to come up with action steps and drive towards solutions, take a stock at who has already been in this space doing the work. Like, what are the organizations? What are the groups? There are always new groups popping up. I think that's great. I think you're going to see a lot of new companies that are coming up and starting because of this. But you have people who have been deep in this work for many, many years. And, I joked with someone the other morning. I said, wow, the career that I chose, right? Like this is, people have chosen to make this their life mission, and lean on those people and pay those people to do the work that needs to be done. I would also say, we talked about, I think we talked about this the other night, the 3 things, and we need empathy, right? I think everyone needs to have some empathy, but I think specifically in this moment, we need for white people to have more empathy, right? To your point about people being angry and saying things like, just have some empathy right now. And we also need to think about, how are we going to not change the system? Because again, the system was never built for all people, right? How do we dismantle the system and rebuild it so that it is based and rooted in equity and equality? And then the last thing I would say is, we need people to step up as leaders. I joined your call this morning. I was so proud of you. It was great to see people who didn't have the answers step up to even create the forum so that the conversation could happen, even if it wasn't perfect. How do you still open the forum and be a leader in the space, in the industry, to take the actions that are needed to begin to come to a place of understanding? And I think that is so important in our communities. And I think, we see what happens when we don't have great leaders.
That part.
And I'm gonna stop there. We see what happens when we don't have great leaders.
Leadership is key. Leadership
Absolutely.
and moving in the right direction is key. But let me piggyback off of that. If you are a leader of a small business, a big business, leader in the home even, you have a responsibility to show people right from wrong, to say something when things are not right, when things don't make sense, or they're racist, or they just aren't fair or unjust. You have a responsibility as the leader. And so you got to call each other out and make sure that people are just doing the right thing at the end of the day. So leadership goes beyond just work, but in your personal life and circle and whatnot. Step up, leaders, if you are listening, because we all need you to do, what is right. And then we talked about children, how you have been having those hard conversations with children from different ages and whatnot, from, like you said, 6 to 11. And you are very much the person that I would trust. I trust my child with you anyway, but I trust you to have these conversations with her because you break it down so she understands them. But what do you feel the conversations need to be when parents are having conversations with their kids about diversity, inclusion? I think you said equity is something else. What advice can you provide someone that is stuck and they're like even thinking, oh, they're too young, maybe we're not there yet, and they don't want to deal with it as well?
I mean, I think it's what you expose children to, right? I mean, I think this, and I love Peyton. So, Peyton loves lobster.
Well,
Why
God,
does Peyton love lobster? Because Peyton was exposed to lobster at a very early age, right? Like we children only know what parents expose them and the community around them exposes them to, which is why, there's these taglines going around that you're not born racist, right? You learn those behaviors from people around you. So my question would be, what are you modeling at home? How are you talking about people? How are you using, whether it be race, socioeconomic status, privilege, as a way of whether it's raising yourself or putting someone else down? How do you speak to your children? What books do you have on your shelf? Jamara, the books I buy for the kids, right? Like,
I'm looking at a stack of books. Little Legends, Exceptional Men in Black History, Visionary Women Around the World,
that's
Bold
right. That
Black
one's for
with
Jack. That's right. That one's for Jack.
Bold
That's right.
Black. My daughter left her stack of books here from like homeschooling, and they just so happen to be a collection of books sent by her auntie Wolfpack, as she calls her. That's another story for another day. And they are all around great Black leaders, because I will say I do look in the libraries in the school, and some of these books don't exist. And so we are doing our part to make sure that she's learning about all cultures and all races and all religions. So, because that is what the world is made up of.
There's this incredible service that delivers within a day or two where you can find all of these great books called Amazon, where we can go and shop.
I can't with you.
All of these
I
resources.
was like, let me write that down as a source. Let me drop that in the show notes. Reality.
If you can't find it and if your child can't find it in their library, if you can't find it in the local bookstore, there's so many places where you can find these books. And now you can even just search the internet and they can tell you what are some great books. I even think about, who are the businesses that you're shopping at, right? Like, are you only going into places where your kids see one certain demographic serving food, or one demographic behind the register, or one demographic who owns the store, right? So these are the things that people can be conscious about. And I know we have our own patterns and we have our own things that we do every single day that we feel are like, it's easy, but none of this is easy.
No.
And we have to figure out how to step outside of what's easy and convenient, because it's been convenient to have a racist system, right? But what is inconvenient is what happens when you continuously push people to the edge. How do we teach these things early on? And I would also say, you know, depending on their age, like I think books are good for like, you know, someone's Jack's age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like books, puzzles. Are you showing kids representation from different backgrounds? I love when I hear, you know, kids just telling me what they want to be, because they have no preconceived notion that there is potentially a system around them that makes it harder for them to be that.
But
So yeah.
Go ahead. No, you got it. Finish that.
No, I was just gonna say, so those are, you know, those are things that we can do, is how can we just show children images of different cultures and backgrounds and experiences so that they have this level of empathy that they can continue to take into their preteen years and then their high school years and then college. I mean, I think one of the best things growing up in Northern Virginia is that we had every type of race around us, right? Every type of socioeconomic status that we grew up around. And I tell people that, of course, it was a plan, it was God's plan, but that it was in alignment with how I could then view the world was just a blessing that I could never, you can't pay for that, right? Yeah. Because it was something that we just grew up knowing and knowing that it was okay, and knowing that a woman wearing a hijab was
that was
their
normal.
style. That's their culture. Right?
Yeah, that was normal.
Right? Like that stuff was so just like every day to us. And that is what I also want people to think about, is like, for some people, that's not their everyday experience. Some people live in communities where they actually don't see anyone who looks any different from them. And maybe the first time they do that is when they go to college or when they go to in the workplace. How we continue to keep an open door to have conversations and to help people educate themselves, right? That is very important. I think we went off from children, but I think that kind of teaches us the different stages and talks about how we can address it in different points.
Because children become adults.
That's right.
And to your point, as parents, we are setting the foundation, the roots of what they will be and what they will think is acceptable. And when you're talking about exposing children to different things, so for Jackson's pre-K graduation, one of the questions they asked about, what is your favorite color, favorite food? And last question was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Jackson wants to be a police officer.
Wow.
Okay. I have nothing negative to say about that. He's seen police officers somewhere and he says it with a smile. I don't tell him anything either way, because let's be very clear. There are great police officers. Absolutely. There are people who do protect and serve. And my expectation of my son, if he does choose any career, is to do it with excellence. Do it as if someone's watching always. I don't, if you're religious or not, but somebody's watching you. So you do always what's right. And if that's the job that he wants to take, I will support him in anything that he does, as long as he does it with excellence, long as he does it with empathy, long as he does it knowing that he has a responsibility for whatever job that he chooses. And so, we'll see a couple years from now where he lands.
Jackson would be a great police officer, but absolutely always tells you, wash your hands. Like, he's all about
I know. He's like, wash your hands. Yeah. When we get off the phone, he's like, Auntie Wolfpack, stay safe, wash your hands. It's like, how do you even know? He's 5. He tells everybody to wash your hands when they're on the phone, and everybody's like, okay, Jack. But I'm glad that he knows that he needs to wash them little dirty hands as a 5-year-olds carry around. So, and then I am going to drop some resources in the show notes, Amazon being one of them, but I am going to take it a step further. In the books that I mentioned, I'm going to put them a link on our Amazon page where I keep all of our resources, so people can be exposed to some of these awesome books and other resources that we mentioned. And then when you think about adults, do you have favorite people you follow or organizations or articles? What resources do you feel like are even a good start to get started in just trying to do better?
This is really, this question is really hard. And as I saw kind of like what we were going to be talking about today, I was thinking about what action can I leave people with? And I think, the reality is that, again, we could have a whole nother episode on resources depending on where you are in your journey. There are some people who don't even want to say that there is a difference between a white person and a Black person. You are at the beginning of your journey, and there are certain books and resources that you probably need to read versus someone who is comfortable with the language, comfortable talking about race and privilege and white supremacy and all of these things that maybe you're in the middle of your journey, so you wouldn't read, you probably wouldn't read a beginner's book, right? But I think there are different places. I think things that I've been rereading lately are White Fragility, The Fire Next Time. I think James Baldwin has an incredible list of books that you can read. I also say read something that pushes you to learn about a culture or an experience that is outside of your own. That's really as simple as it is. Starts to build empathy, right? I will tell you one quick story because I know we've been talking for a very long time. I will tell you one quick story.
Man down.
around, in 2013, I believe it was, I spent about 2.5 weeks in India. And I would say, as someone who, again, has grown up in the DMV area, someone who has had many experiences, whether it be in the US or abroad, whether it be visiting Navajo nations or whatever that be, that experience was one that I think really shifted my understanding of that country. And I did so much research when I came back because I just didn't understand certain things about religion or even caste system that exists there. I mean, so many things, the history, and everyone can always continuously learn, right? So everyone needs to think about, what is it that I have a lot of questions about and don't know anything about, or something that I don't want to burden someone else about, and then find a book to read, find a video, there are just so many resources that exist. But what I will ask is that people not put the burden on Black people to teach, especially in this moment. Especially unless it's your job like it's mine, right? And I don't even call it teaching. What I do, I call it coaching, I call it consulting, but don't put that burden on people right now. Give people a moment to get out of this stage, and I think then there will be an additional openness to having conversations. But do some work, do some research,
It's interesting when you said that. It made me think about, like, with this homeschooling situation where Peyton has a challenge and a bucket list of things she's supposed to do while she's dealing with this. We're all dealing with COVID, and challenge yourself to learn about a new culture, a new religion, a new area. Just find some time and learn about something that, if it happened to come up in conversation, you wouldn't be looking like a deer in headlights, that you would actually be able to contribute to a conversation about a culture of people you see every single day, people you interact with every single day. Challenge yourself to learn about the people that are in your community, the cultures that are represented in the schools that your children go to. And then that's, like you said, Lynette, where that empathy comes in, because then people will have a better understanding, be like, okay, that makes sense. We're different. There's love, but we've had those conversations, and I've done.
It's about relationships, Jamar. And I think, it's about those relationships that matter. And I encourage people to find someone that you feel safe around, to have those open conversations that are void of judgment, right? Not void of telling the truth to someone or challenging someone, but void of judgment. And I think those are the spaces that will allow people to continue to push their thinking, right? Like, we push each other's thinking on a lot of things all the time, like almost every conversation we have, right?
I know. It's healthy, good.
We have we have different opinions on things, but we have such a good relationship and trust. And at the end of the day, we know it's not judgment, it's love, it's learning. And that's what pushes my thinking on how I coach people and how I approach people. And so I mean, everyone is always learning. Just don't stop learning. And when you feel like you stop learning, to me, that's the point where you told me you gave up. And some people don't have a choice, and that's a privilege when you get to choose to give up, because some of us don't have a choice to living the lives that we live. And so you're making a conscious decision even right there about how much you value, if you call me your friend, or you're making a choice what that value proposition is.
Ooh, yeah, it's a lot. I think, like you said, find a safe person that you feel like you can just be humble and say, look, I'm coming to you because I just need a better clarification or some guidance and some direction, and let them know that you are genuinely trying to learn, to grow, to understand. And no one will ever, I don't think anyone will fault you for that part, but you might need to give them some time right now. Or if it's someone's life work, you hire them and they guide you, and you pay people for their knowledge and their time. You don't use them. I owe you a check, Lynette.
You cooked me way too many meals, and I've had way too many of your desserts for you to pay me. But,
I'll pay you in love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I do truly believe in that, we have undervalued people who do this work and the toll that it takes on their
Emotionally
psyche.
Yeah.
Every day to walk into these spaces and do this work and
Fight for a whole community of people and be a voice. We talked about that too. Like, we are not the voice of all Black people in our age group from the same place. No, we are a portion, and I feel like everyone's story needs to be heard. So do a lot more listening, less talking, and just have some more empathy. That's just, I think that's the tone. Just really, this is the time to not make everything about you when you're not the one that's hurting. And so how can people from different colors and backgrounds be a part of this movement? Because it is definitely a movement that I don't think, and I pray, doesn't stop. How can people get involved?
There's so many ways to get involved. This is, I hope that this becomes a way of life around how we fight for justice, and not just a one time or 1 week, or as we talked about earlier, one media cycle, right? I would say stay involved, whether that means, and Jamira, you said this so eloquently earlier, is whether that means pulling a chair up to the table for someone when you look around and realize how exclusive a table is. Look around and figure out, who do you need to include? What voices aren't being heard in this moment, right? Like right now, there are 2 Black women in this conversation, right? Like we're missing many voices and identities and intersections, even in this conversation, right? So hopefully people don't take this as the only conversation they
Darn it,
listen
Lynette,
to.
we're the pot calling the kettle black right now.
Really, but this is the work we have to do. We have to look in our own situations, right? Like, so how are we creating those spaces to be to include the voices that aren't being heard? I think the other thing is, if you have the resources, donate and research what you're donating to. Right?
That's another good point.
I think people need to be very, very conscious about what they put their money, and especially in this time. And don't just like throw your money to some bucket organization that you haven't done any research around. Do the research. Make sure they're actually doing something that is for the people, for the communities, and give to those. You can vote. I'm going to say it again. You can vote. You can think about local office positions. I think people forget these offices, like the commissioner, city council, the judges, like
school board.
These people, school board. That's a whole nother podcast.
That's another conversation.
School board. and really think about your community, your local community. It starts at home, right? And then it starts once you walk out on the street. And then it starts when you go to the grocery store, right? Like, you can take steps outside of your circle of comfort and see what are those spaces that need change and inclusivity and diversity. And when I say diversity, I mean all elements of diversity: gender, racial, religion, sexual orientation, all of those things. Who is at the table? And I think beyond that, then you can start to consciousness on what is right for you. What path is right for you to walk in? You know, I had a bunch of friends who, and I try to tell people just not to do this, but they were mentioning like, I can't protest because I have a kid at home. And I'm like, okay, well, there are a bunch of people protesting right now who have kids at home or whose kids are standing beside them, or no judgment, but don't make a judgment about how someone else chooses to be a part of the movement.
Right.
If someone is taking an action in the movement and it is a progressive action that is driving us to change, allow them to do that thing and you do your thing. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think everyone choosing what that thing is. And again, to the point we made earlier, learning about it, make continuously improving your acumen around it. And I think that will then allow people to choose the lane that they want to fight in, because it is a fight. It's a fight. And so I think that's the way that people can do it, because there's not a one size fits all model. And that's the great thing, is that everyone can play a role.
You just made me think about the military. My brother's in the Army, and it just made me think about when they even go to combat, how they all aren't doing the same role or job to win the war. There are people that cook, some people that are medics, some people are in the front line, but the reality is they make up a unit, a group, a squad with the same goal, and that's to win. So whatever feels good to you as far as how you can be a part of the movement, do it. But show up in some way, capacity, monetary donation, being on the front line, posting what you got to post on social media, calling people out where you need to call them out. Do your part in this movement, because you don't want to be left behind when the rest of us are making changes, shifting, partnering, allying, and you are stuck. You're missing out on the change that needs to happen. And so we are going to wrap this up and shift gears a bit. You know, the show is all about living well-rounded and on a personal level. And let's just pretend like COVID is in. Let's pretend like this was a couple months ago and we were having this interview. What are you saying no to in order to say yes to what matters most in your upcoming season? The yes.
You know, Jerron, what I love about a well-rounded life is that you always talk about seasons, right? I think that is just so important for people to understand that there's no balance, right?
No,
but in a season, you can choose what you are going to prioritize. So for me, when we are, I don't even know how to say out of a pandemic, because it feels like as we just see these new cases jumping up, that's going to be harder. But it is safe for us to go back to being more connected with people live. I'll say that because I feel very connected to people. I'm actually more connected to people than I have before, is that I want to physically be around my friends and my family. My friends are mostly my family. So my family, and make sure that I choose this next season as a point to spend time with people. I am going to have that as the higher part of the scale. I'm a Libra, so I like my scale, right? Like I'm going to have that as the higher part of my scale will be around family and connecting with people, doing spending some time really reflecting on what I need for self-care, right? Like, you know, I think while COVID has allowed me to not travel, which is what I was doing all the time before, what COVID did do though is it still made my work life very challenging and I mean time consuming and never turning it off. And so I really do want to, you know, spend time going to the spa and really thinking about like just reading a book and just like taking more time for myself, for my family, for my friends, and deprioritizing some of the things that I would have put on my plate as far as like work and other projects. And then the thing that's always intertwined in there is never letting my guard down around this fight that we have towards November and this fight that we have towards dismantling the system. And those will always be things that will be intertwined in that. But I will be prioritizing those things for sure.
Yeah, and I want to partner with you on that, stepping up in those areas. You need people to partner with you on the outskirts. So we got to talk about that later. All right, we're going to be quick with these rapid fire. I'm not going to have you on the show and it'd be so heavy.
Okay,
So,
rapid fire. Let's do it.
So take off your D&I hat. That's right.
It's off. It's off. It's off.
Okay, and put on your friend from around the way hat.
All right.
All right. So I feel like I should know most of these.
Right. I was like, Nikki, you should answer first, and then I should answer.
Yeah, for as best friend for the last time. All right. When you were little and someone were to ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was your answer?
Teacher.
Well, you are doing that very much.
In many ways, I am. Yes.
Legit. Lynette School of Get Your Life in Order. Check yourself. What's your favorite book?
Oh, man. I would have to say right now, I'm reading the originals and it is really good. Yeah, I would say the originals. I mean, I also like books that like are fluff and like mean nothing really because my day is so hard and like heavy all the time.
You like Phil with the rom-coms?
Yo, when Phil told me that, I really felt a new connected point to my lab partner because it was like, yo, like, how did we not know? Like, how did I not know this? Like, this is one of those things that was magical.
So real quick backstory. In high school, Lynette and Phil were lab partners in whatever science class y'all had together. Physics. They were lab partners. So her nickname for him is lab partner because they were literally lab partners when we were teenagers. You are stuck on an island. What are 3 things you must have besides kids, man, any physical person?
I would say a cell phone because that's important. A way to get off the island. I would say a lighter because if you have fire,
what you lighting up on the island?
You can cook with fire. Like you need fire. Fire is important. And I would say water. And if I couldn't have technology, I would probably say a pillow. And if anyone knows me, they probably know why I say a pillow because I need to sleep in conditions that are.
Don't talk about My Child and Lobster. We need a whole nother podcast episode about Lynette and her way of living and quality of life. We're going to move on because we're going to just move on to the next question. Speaking of luxuries, what is your favorite restaurant?
My favorite restaurant actually is not in this country. My favorite restaurant is in Rome, Italy, called Three Quarti.
See, I told you. My favorite restaurant is in Italy.
It is a restaurant where I literally do a layover in Rome for 4 hours, go to the restaurant, get back on the plane, and go somewhere else. So yeah. I would say that would be it.
We did talk about hopping over to Italy just to eat. That's right. And then going back.
We only need a day. We could do Rome. We could just do Rome in a day and be done. Breakfast.
This should be our next adventure. Rome in a day. And speaking of Rome, and Lynette's very well traveled for work and for leisure. What's your favorite place you've gone so far?
Jamar, you know my favorite place. Costa Rica.
Every year she retreats and disconnects and lives her best life in this secret place in Costa Rica that hopefully she'll take me to one day, guys. Can we all ask my BFF to take me to her favorite place?
If your followers put it in the comments enough,
you tried it.
I will vote it. I will think about it. Costa Rica, absolutely my favorite place on earth. Beautiful. I think it's also because, to your point, I just escape from the world, turn off everything, and it is the week for me. You get
into like almost every continent, 101 trillion cities. Yeah.
That's the
place.
You
won't take me to Costa Rica with her. Career-wise,
she's testing my friendship right now. Well, we'll have to see.
It's coming up. The trip's coming up, and we've been on lockdown. She won't take me. Right. Career-wise, what has been one of your most proud moments?
Yeah. I would have to say maybe about 3-4 years, maybe 3 years ago. I used to work at a tech company. We would do an annual outreach trip. We took about 100, gosh, I want to say 140, 50, maybe 70 plus people, Black people from this tech company to Detroit. We did our annual outreach trip there. And I remember leading up to the trip, it was just so exhausting. Like, it was so exhausting. We just had so many elements of it, trying to house 170 plus people, build out activities. It was just crazy. But there was this one moment in Flint, passing out water. We took these trucks, parked them at the end of the street, and people would just carry water to houses. And I just stopped and looked around, and I was like, wow, like this is part of my job. This is my life. Like, and I just couldn't believe that we could utilize resources, and a company was so open to letting us do this experience, and do something for people who look like us and who needed this, and who were forgotten, who had been forgotten. Mm-hmm. It was probably one of the most incredible experiences. And second to that is bringing them all to my hometown of the DMV and doing the same thing in DC. There's nothing like coming home and doing something in your own community. And so those I think were two moments where you just have to pinch yourself and say, is this really what I get to wake up and do every day?
That's awesome. What is a misconception that people have about you?
I think it depends on when you meet me. I think some people wouldn't, even just similar to what Phil said, I don't think people would know I love rom-coms. Like, literally, like, that is, if you want,
killing me with these rom-coms.
Like, if you want to just say, Lynette, what would make your day? It would be watching, like, best man's wedding, my best friend's wedding, like The Holiday. Like, it would just literally be all of these rom-coms in a day, just sitting down, having popcorn. Hopefully it's made by Phil. So literally, like, I mean, Jamar, I just hope you know, next time when we are free, like, this is literally what we're going to do.
You and Phil and his popcorn? Y'all got it? No.
All of us together.
I rolled up on him today and say,
go ahead. What did you say?
I rolled up on him today and say, hey, what are you watching? Just a little rom-com. Don't even tell me what it is. Just a little rom-com.
I mean, so I don't think people would know that. I don't think people would know that.
You like fluff movies, like you said. Right. You like the stuff that's easy on the brain after a long day. So I will give you that.
But I've always liked those. I can tell you rom-coms like from like back in the day.
Whoa, calm down. We're good.
Okay. I forgot this was rapid fire. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's an hour and a half in, honey. You can give them a list on your own Instagram page. Lynette's top 10 rom-coms of all time. If you could meet anyone in the world, who would it be?
Ooh. Alive. You know, it would be Oprah. And I know that's cliche, but I say Oprah because
y'all personalities are similar.
No, she's met so many people in her lifetime that I think she just has so many stories that even the public does not know of, right? I think she could just give you so much history and insight. She's had a struggle. I just think she would be just the wisdom she would be able to give. Person that's not living would be Nelson Mandela. I mean, yeah. I think anyone who has had a chance to experience his childhood home in Soweto, or you've heard his stories, like it's incredible. I mean, he would be a person that, again, I think I think about if like he was alive today,
what would he be thinking and doing?
What would he be thinking and doing and saying? Yeah. So those would be my two people.
I just want Oprah's memoir to be like everything I know, and Beyonce's. I want it to be all of that.
I don't feel like she'll drop it. I feel like it's going to be in her will, and it's going to drop like after she's gone. Like I feel like she has that much knowledge that she can't even tell us everything right now.
And she don't want to hit a Michelle and promote it. She just gonna be like, and I left you guys a gift. It'll be one of those type of situations.
Yes. Yes, yes,
You
yes.
are very talented, but if you could learn a new skill, what would it be?
It would be learning French.
Hey, Peyton
That would be
Jr.
I know me, Peyton. Listen, Peyton and I, we have very similar taste, very similar. Like
Yeah,
it would definitely be learning French, and I know Peyton's working on that right now.
she is teaching
So,
herself French, so I respect that. What is your guilty pleasure?
wine, but Lambrusco, like a very specific wine. That is my guilty pleasure. If I don't have it in the house,
I ain't
believe
never
me,
had none, y'all. You ain't ever give me no Lamborghini wine.
wow. So you all are actually then also learning about the list of things that Jamira and I must do over the
We've done
that
everything else in the world. We done traveled across the world and seen a lot of things, partied, learned, grown, but I ain't getting none of your Lamborghini wine. So, so
it really is interesting. Really, I mean, I'm sure you'll edit this part out, Jamar, but like, I literally, there was a wine, a Lambrusco that I found in a store, and they were discontinuing it. And I found out that they were discontinuing it, and I drove to over 10 stores to get their last collection of this
I'm not
wine.
editing this out. I want people to know
From
what the desperation looks like.
from Austin all the way to San Antonio and back to like get this wine. It was, I called it my wine trip. And literally I went to all the stores in between on the day I found out that they were discontinuing it.
That is
buy it all.
called dedication, boys and girls. Yikes. And it's what's one thing on your bucket list?
I hate to put this on my bucket list because I feel like if I do this right now, I'm holding myself to the fire of doing it. But I would like to open a school. I think that is where my legacy is to have a school that is built for kids, all kids, to have an equitable education, and to teach real history and to teach kids about, to our points earlier, about empathy and love and compassion, and so that is on my bucket list.
Can we start? Well, you've already started a virtual educational center with your kiddo circle. So
I know what they would learn in the school. I absolutely know what they would be learning in the
so
school.
let's just continue the movement,
Yeah.
and just use this as your foundation to build this school, because virtual teaching is the wave of the future, and so y'all can have meetups every now and again. But I'm just here telling you, we can make this happen. Like ASAP.
That's the thing that, when I think about, job well done, that will be the check.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I know you're gonna do it. Just let me know how I can help. All right, Lynette, this has been a lot, and I will let you go to sleep now.
I will definitely be doing that.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you or follow you on social or anything, or have any questions, how can people reach you?
I tell people to reach me on LinkedIn. It is the inbox that is checked and cleared. I say LinkedIn, which is just Lynette Barksdale on LinkedIn. I definitely try to create some separation in my life, use social media more for my family and immediate network. And so I definitely, LinkedIn is a great place to connect. And, maybe I'll open up my social media one day, but for right now.
But LinkedIn, you are very active, which I need to do a lot better at LinkedIn, but Lynette does a great job on LinkedIn. So go check her out over there. See how we're supposed to be using LinkedIn, because some of us just don't use it. But LinkedIn has proven to be a great resource for the work that she's doing. So go check her out over there. Obviously, it's going to be in the show notes as well. Oh gosh, like I said, Lynette, thank you, not just for this interview, but for your guidance, your leadership, but most importantly, your friendship. I couldn't ask for a better friend over the past, I'm just going to say 2 decades. We only talk about how old we are. But we've been friends.
You're right, but you're definitely right.
It's legit been 2 decades plus. We met in middle school. And yeah, she's been a part of my life ever since, not missing a beat. So thank you, Lynette, for just being you in the work you're doing. And well-rounders, do me a favor, let us know that you listened to us. Drop us some comments in the post for today as well. Share this episode for anybody that you feel like needs to hear it. People that just really just know the importance of the work that Lynette is doing and the work that a lot of other people are doing to put action behind, what is going on right now. So share this episode, subscribe, leave a review, rate, do whatever you need to do to get the message out. I appreciate you tuning in, spending time with me and my friend, and just learning and just hanging out with us today. Thank you, well-rounders. Have a great weekend. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode, and I will be in touch with you soon. Bye. Friends, thanks for kicking it with us this week. Remember to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode airs. I'd love it if you leave us a review and share this goodness with your squad. Until next time, seek a well-rounded life and remember to focus on what matters most.